Welcome to Tea History with Katie. Today's lesson is about the Boston Tea Party, which was no party, it was rebellion. The British were taxing American colonies on everything from magazines and newspapers to sugar and tea, and they had no part in voting or parliament, which is where we got the phrase, no taxation without representation. In my history book, someone had quoted that the British would let people die of starvation, yet the collection of revenue never stopped. Now, in 1773, they heard of 7 ships that were coming to the American colonies, which were full of tea, 4 of which were coming to the Boston harbor. A plan was devised by the Boston townspeople that the 4 ships were either to be turned away and sent back or destroyed. They wanted to make sure that none of King George III's tainted tea made its way into their colonial teapots. So they waited for the 4 ships to get there. 1 ship got lost in a sea storm and stranded on an island, but the other 3 made it to the Boston harbor, and that night the plan began. So, on the night of December the 16th, 1773, the largest committee of Boston townspeople ever held to this day met, some as young as 13 years old. They met, disguised themselves, commandeered the 3 ships, and started dumping the tea overboard into the harbor. There was Indian tea, Chinese tea, black tea, green tea, loose leaf tea, and tea cakes. They didn't harm the ships, but every bit of tea was to be sunk. Now these tea cakes either looked like round tea cakes like we know today, or were shaped like chocolate bars, which meant they were frisbeed out into the water. There was so much tea that they dumped overboard that it was stacking on the surface of the water and it wouldn't sink. So they had to row out in little rowboats and take rakes and smack the tea to make it sink below the surface. They didn't want any of this tea to be salvageable. The amount of tea they dumped out into the harbor is valued to be over $1 million worth of tea in today's currency. The next day, the news of the rebellion had spread to New York by none other than Paul Revere, and with it, the spirit of rebellion. So the next ship that was about to land in New York would be treated the same way. It was eventually turned away and sent back. Thus, the Boston Tea Party is remembered as the first spark of rebellion in the American Revolutionary War, which we won, by the way. So, thank you for joining me for today's lesson in Tea History with Katie.